Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire. Hey, Maggie.
Hey, Mike.
How's it going?
Oh, it's going. It's a busy day already, and it's a Friday morning. It's going. How are you?
I'm doing great. We
Nice.
recorded an episode last night. Now we're recording one today, back to back.
I know. Yeah. My favorite back-to-back days. I'll just be happy when our back-to-back days are surrounded in my kids going to physical school. So
Yeah.
that's all I've got a little bit of whatever tone on this morning is that I've been technical support for 3 kids this morning, and it's a little too early on a Friday to be taking on all that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we have an interesting discussion today, which maybe will lift your spirits a little bit.
Yeah. It's one of the more philosophical discussions about money, which are ones that I tend to like. They could feel like we're meandering at times, but they're kind of some of my favorite discussions to have.
Yeah, and we'll get to a point. I promise all of our listeners that this will this will land on some tactical advice.
We can't promise when or how, but we will get to a point.
Right.
It will land somewhere at some point. Just wait for it. You know, you got to buckle up and get ready for it.
So the idea for this episode came up when I was with my in-laws in Germany over Christmas, and my brother-in-law, who's an attorney in Munich, Germany, he was telling me how much he enjoys the podcast. He's listened to 100 episodes. And I was just like, wow, that's a lot.
Good for
Considering that a lot of our stuff is about health savings accounts, which don't apply
Somewhat
to Germans
US.
at all.
Yeah, you're
exactly.
right. Yeah.
So he admitted that once we start talking about Roth IRAs, he kind of fast forwards a little bit. Yeah, he's like, this isn't as helpful, but he really enjoys it, and I appreciate.
Well, this will be a globally applicable topic.
Yes,
so that's nice.
So
hey, hello to Munich, Germany. Hope you enjoy it.
So we were hiking with the family, and he was saying that he was thinking about writing in a question, and his question was, how do you put a dollar value on your time and then use that to make decisions about what to buy versus make, or do yourself versus hire, or buy something new or keep using? How do you evaluate all these decisions?
Perhaps.
Yeah, or do without?
It's a great question.
Yeah, it is a great question. And it got me thinking about how to actually structure this advice, because when I was discussing it with him, and we talked about it for 20 minutes, I realized that the way that I go about evaluating these things has become very intuitive for me. And he was really looking for something like a structured approach. And what we landed on, spoiler alert, there is no silver bullet. There's no one answer. There's no formal structure or calculation. Yeah. But the way you evaluate these decisions can apply to all of the scenarios you're going to run into. And that's what we want to discuss in this episode, is how you go about that.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Mike, in that there's no formula here, and there's no specific, it is a very gray topic, right? It's back to personal finance. It's a great example of there's so many personal subjective opinions in how you might do this. But I think you've done a good job of laying out some of the types of questions you should ask yourself and considerations you should make. And so taking something that's really unstructured and at least trying to put some structure around it to coach and counsel how other people might want to think through some of these decisions around the value of our time versus money.
So the way we're going to structure this episode today is we're going to first cover what we call the myths, or the ways of thinking that I think a lot of people have adopted to try to help them with these decisions, but have really become crutches which prevent you from making really good decisions. And then we'll go through some of the questions you should be asking yourself on how to evaluate these decisions.
Okay, so let's do the first. I think we could call these time myths.
Time myths. I like it.
Yeah. The first time myth is, I have no free time. This is a good one because I've had this.
You tell me this all the time.
And many times throughout my life. And I'm much better at now realizing what is true and why this myth is wrong is that, for most people, your schedules are what you make of them, right? So you might currently be stretched too thin and you really feel like you have no time, but that is also a choice that you have often made, right? To commit to different things, to how much time you want to spend at work, et cetera. And so to a large degree, you are as busy as you let other people in the world make you. Now, I don't want to discount, there are people who hold 3 jobs and, really are back to back and have no time and can barely get by in this world. That's not what I'm talking about here, right? So if that is the reality of a situation, that is not a myth. You may actually have no free time because you are holding 3 jobs and trying to raise kids and everything else. But what I find to be a very common scenario is people like you and me, Mike, who have one job, now maybe a side passion or, side hustle or something like we have with the podcast. Either way, I look at back before. Here's a good example, personal example. Before I had kids, I felt like I had no free time. I had a lot of free time. I was making choices about how much I got paid to do one job. I worked more than I had to or needed to at that job because I just chose to. And it was my own kind of bad habits and work ethic and everything else. And I still was able to squeeze in a decent amount of television and other things. So I do think this is a big myth of, I have no free time. You are in control of your time. It is hard to control it, but you do make the decisions of how you spend it. And I've read a really good book that I'll put a link to in the show notes called Off the Clock. And it's called Feel Less Busy While Getting More Done. Anyways, in that book, she talks about tracking your time, which a lot of people talk about. And I've done that for periods of time. And tracking your time is an amazing exercise where you do realize how much free time you actually have and how you're spending it and the choices you're making with your time. So anyways, that's the first myth, that you have no free time. That is truly a myth, and it is controllable because, you're making the choices of what you commit to and where your time goes.
The other myth goes something like this. I make $100 an hour, and so anything that costs me less than that per hour, I should be paying for. And the reason this is a myth is that you are not working every second of the day, and not every hour you work directly translates to more money. Now, there could be a situation where you are a freelance plumber and you have more jobs than you can possibly fit in a 24-hour day. And you really do have the choice of, you could work an hour and make $100 or whatever it is. But for most people, you're on a salaried position, or you have a certain number of clients that you're doing work for. And so an hour free on a Sunday morning is not an opportunity for you to make $100. It's an opportunity for you to make $0. And so this does not really work for most people's lives. And so even though your annual salary might turn out to be $100 an hour, you are going to get that regardless of whether or not you mow the lawn or not. So this can't apply to hiring or outsourcing for different services.
On that same note, Mike, about paying someone else to do things, another related myth is it saves me time to have someone else do it, right? So the same idea of, I should pay someone else to do it. Well, it's saving me time. And here's some kind of fallacies in that myth, right? True, if someone cleans your house, you save time, but you don't save all that time. So for example, you spend time looking for someone that you like, using the house cleaning example, to find someone that you're happy with. You need to schedule them. You need to answer their questions. You need to pay them. You need to check on the work that they've done to see if you like the quality. You need to deal with any issues. They sometimes might cancel. They sometimes might decide to, not work anymore. And then you've got to find someone else. And so you're asking for references and doing all this stuff. So, and also, I don't know if you have this memory from, I'm guessing your parents didn't pay someone to clean their house when they're a kid. I'm just making that guess about you, Mike.
Yeah, you're right.
But when I was a kid, at times we did have someone that came and cleaned our house. It wasn't all the time, but during good times we did, and good financial times we did. And I always remember and I just always have this memory that we had to clean the house before she came. And we were always like, why are we doing? And now as an adult, I understand this because you can't clean when people's crap is everywhere. But I just always remember being like, wait, why are we cleaning so that she can clean? And so you have to prep and clean up before they come. And so anyways, yes, there's a lot of time involved in that. So you don't just save your 2 hours of cleaning. You maybe save an hour in real time because you're spending time managing the rest of the process. So things that you think save you time because someone else is going to do it, it still does take your time to manage that process and to deal with any of the kind of things that, go sideways about that service that you're paying for or whatever else.
So those are 3 pretty common myths, which are not going to apply to everybody consistently, but I think everybody can relate to them, hopefully. And in our opinion, really holding you back from making the best possible decisions about your time and where you should be spending money to buy back some of your time.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is so interesting about time that as you were structuring this conversation, Mike, and follow up from the conversation with your brother-in-law, I was just thinking, time in general is not a 1-for-1 trade, right? So when I think about the amount of hours I have in the day, and let's say you just take the amount of hours you have when you're not working, if you were, giving yourself a reasonable number of hours to work each day, at the end of the day, literally at the end of the day, my time is less valuable than other hours in the day because I'm tired. So I think about how I feel at the end of a workday. I don't have the same level of energy that I have like Saturday morning to get things done, as an example, right? And so I can't spend all of my time in high productivity mode. So I can't, and I use that example because it relates to a lot of the myths we talked about, right? Of like, I have no free time. And it's like, well, you do have free time. And I think about, let me just use myself as an example. I do have free time. I spend time watching television with my husband almost every single night of the week. Now, I don't think I can trade that off and say, well, I should use that time to mow the lawn, right? Be like that my free hour to hour and a half on some nights, not all nights, that I should use that to paint something and not hire someone or mow the lawn or, whatever else it is. Because A, that time's at night when it's dark. And so that's not helpful time. B, that's time when actually I need to kind of like unwind and relax. And I can't be in this high productivity mode all of the time. So I think that's an important way to think about your time, especially as you think about the trade-off of time versus paying someone else to do something or doing it yourself, or buying a good or service versus making it yourself.
Yeah, that's a great point, Maggie. I think about what I'm like at the end of the day, and I am napping on my couch. And so I can't do anything during that time.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go through some of the questions you should be asking to help you evaluate your spending decisions based on the value of your time. And as we mentioned early on, like there is no single formula, and everything is going to be pretty unique to the task you are looking at, the time of day, the options you have for income or other uses of your time. And so getting into the habit of asking yourself these questions, even if it's not like a formal process, just kind of like understanding how you feel about certain scenarios is going to help you make better decisions. So let's run through some of these. First question, could I be incrementally making more money with this time? And if so, how much? So go back to the plumber example. If you're a plumber and you could fill your day with 24 hours of jobs, that's a big difference from if you are a salaried employee, and whether or not you work an hour or don't doesn't translate into more money.
Okay. Another question you can ask yourself is, how much time would it take me to set up and manage the work that somebody else is doing? So we use that example of someone cleaning your house, right? And some of that is a personal question. You need to ask yourself a personal question. So we'll go through some scenarios later, but I'll give you an example. I know how kind of OCD in particular I am. I've had phases in my life where I have paid someone to clean our house. And it's been a short phase because I often just would prefer to do it myself. I'm a little anal about how I want things done. I'm real careful with things. I don't like things getting like banged around. And I would prefer to do it myself. It makes me feel better. I'm in control, which is a issue I have. And I would spend more in that example. I know this is where it's a very personal decision. I would spend more time worrying and micromanaging that poor person would just not enjoy cleaning my house, right? Like it would not be a good experience for any of us. So I think, you just have to ask yourself, like, for you, how much time would you take? So if you have some really intricate, specific job where you want something kind of cleaned up in your backyard or something, and you would spend as much time trying to explain it to someone else as having just done it yourself. Just do it yourself, right?
Yeah.
And especially if it's a shorter task that, by the time you hire a contractor to go find someone to go do that work for you, you may have just spent 2 hours sucking it up and doing it yourself if you can.
Yeah. The next question would be, how much do I dislike the task in question? And this one's going to be super important. And I mean, like, this is why you have money, so that you can make decisions about what you want to do with your time and what you don't. So for example, I kind of like mowing my lawn. And so that use of time, not a big deal for me. I hate sitting in traffic. There is nothing I dislike more than commuting, sitting in traffic. And so,
can you pay someone to sit in traffic for you?
No, but you can pay to take MARTA. You can hire a car. You can do an Uber. You can do all this other stuff to avoid sitting in traffic. And for me, that's a big deal. I think where people get into trouble is that they start outsourcing stuff that they dislike, and they also kind of like, just because they see it as all the same thing. But avoiding things that are a detractor to your well-being and your kind of day-to-day satisfaction, this is an important factor in how to value your time.
Another question is, what else could I be doing with that specific time? So it's the trade-off cost of, what else I'm going to be doing. And it's tied to the energy point that I was making earlier too, of there's a question of what else you could be doing with that specific time, but I think you can mix in there a reality, a pragmatic view of the amount of energy you would have at that point in your week or your day also.
I think a big example would be if you have a specific opportunity to do something with your kids, and in order to do that, you need to pay somebody to do something else. So like your kids have a soccer game that you need to attend, and you need to pay somebody to take care of some other tasks that you are also obligated to do. Even though like you might be paying a ton of money for that particular service, the trade-off is more than you're willing to give up. You want to be at that soccer game more than anything else, and you're willing to pay for that time.
Yeah, that's a great example.
The other point, and this is, Maggie, a direct tie into what you were saying about like your energy level at the end of the day, is like, could you just move this task to a different time of the day or week that works better for you, and avoid the whole outsourcing, do I need to put a dollar value on it? Can you just reshuffle your schedule so that this is no longer a conflict for you?
I think the example you just gave is another one that brings that home, right? Of saying, you might typically only have time to get yard work done on the weekends, but if your kids are in a bunch of sports right now, and there's just a limited number of hours during the, daylight, good weather, et cetera, that you can either do yard work or like be present and happy and engaged with your kids at their sporting events. Mm-hmm. That might be a point in your life where you say, you know what? I'm going to put some money towards this because this is a priority to me. And I want to be there and not be stressed about trying to squeeze 50 things into my Saturday, because those are my relaxing days and I work real hard during the week, right? Yeah. That's an okay trade-off. And it's a thoughtful and intentional one, which is what we're trying to get to here. Now, some other questions that are maybe more relevant when it comes to the decision to DIY something versus just, we've talked about kind of outsourcing and paying someone else to do something too, is, some questions like, would the quality of my work have an adverse outcome? Are there any safety or legal concerns? So I think we've shared some examples where I've been up on my roof blowing out the leaves. I since realized my yard service will charge me $40 to blow out the leaves and the gutters and everything, which I only need done a couple times a year. And it, I don't mind getting up on the roof to do certain things. I have saved, hundreds of dollars with roofing companies doing things up there. But when I get to the edge of the roof near the gutters, I start getting real nervous. It's kind of scary. And at some point I have done it. I know I can do it. I now know it will only save me $40. And that trip to the emergency room / my life just maybe isn't worth it, because it's not something I do every day. I'm not as safety conscious as someone who is a little bit better trained to do that. Mm-hmm. And so I think, those questions around safety are important. I just had some issues with my car, right? And I was spending a little bit more to just make sure that I had safe tires. And after getting pretty freaked out on a blowout on a busy highway, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to, I can get pretty frugal on a lot of things. Like, I'm not going to cut any corners on the safety of my tires at this point. Mm-hmm. I just want to know that I've got good, safe tires and I'm willing to pay for it. And I'm not going into any debt to do it, right? Like I feel good making that decision.
And continuing on the DIY type scenarios, You would also ask yourself, would I learn a new skill, improve a skill, or challenge myself, which might be really enjoyable? And then what is the cost difference for me to go buy the supplies and materials and do this myself versus hiring somebody?
I love the learning a new skill one because I think that's a fun one. I genuinely like to learn how to do new things. And so though I could pay someone to do things, if I can figure it out myself, it's such a good feeling that I enjoy it. And so it's not even about the time or the money. It's I really do enjoy learning a new skill.
Yeah. I think back to a recent one where I had to replace a water spigot on the outside of my house.
That was cool. Yeah.
And I could have maybe paid somebody $100 to come in and do this in 20 minutes and it would be great quality work and I wouldn't have to worry about it.
That would have cost you over $200, FYI.
Okay. Well, maybe $200. Even if it was $20 or $10, I enjoyed doing the research to find out how to replace this.
Yeah.
And then enjoyed the process of cutting open the drywall and cutting the pipe and replacing it and putting it back together and seeing the finished product. It took me way longer than it would have taken a professional. I had to buy materials and the cost difference probably wasn't that big of a deal, but I enjoyed the process and I learned something and that was a valuable use of my time.
Yeah. And there's the secondary future benefit of that investment in learning something too. So that first time, if you were to actually do a comparison, the value of your time and everything else, Mike, it might have actually cost you more to fix it yourself, and depending on how you want to approach that analysis. But the next time you have a problem like that, you now know how to do that and would be that much quicker, which I think is another angle on time too, right? Are you going to use that new skill and service again, or is it something that you will never, ever, ever need again and is such a random kind of fluke? But like changing a tire, right? You will have to change a tire at some point again in your life. And, just something that is a repeatable thing of like, you're going to have a plumbing issue again in your life. And now you know a little bit more about plumbing.
Yeah.
And you like it and you're curious. And, and if you don't, if that stuff sounds like your worst nightmare, then go call a plumber and enjoy the stuff that you enjoy. So here's the last question that I would ask when you're evaluating these things is the money that you might spend doing it supporting the money that you might spend to not do something yourself, to hire someone else, is it supporting a cause that you want to support? So I'll give you an example. I really like supporting young people in my neighborhood or outside my neighborhood that are trying to be entrepreneurial and like offer a service. So when I see a note go out about some young guys in our neighborhood who have started a lawn service and are doing yard cleanup and whatever else, I want to support them, right? And so there's a few times where I knew I could do something myself, but I see these guys starting a business and I want to help them and support them because I remember when I was their age and I remember when I was trying to start a business and they're doing good work. They're working hard. And so I've paid them to do some like yard clear out for us every now and then. And there's other things where, again, a lot of it is often kind of like a mix of like young entrepreneurial kids that are trying to kind of start up a business. And then also there are times when I know people who think about money in a way where they think, I make good money. It is my duty to support the economy. And I want to, I feel good hiring a cleaning person because I'm putting them to work, right? And I'm giving them, I'm giving them more business, right? And that's not wrong, right? That's why it's personal finance. So if that makes you feel good and that fits in line with your financial goals, that you are supporting some other kind of, I keep using the word entrepreneur, but right, some other service, some other person who is offering a service for an amount of money, then that might be your reason, right? That might be part of your intention and wanting to spend money on something versus doing it yourself. And that's good. Yeah, that's a potential reason.
Yeah, that's a great point. So after you've gone through all these questions, we're not asking you to take on some hugely complicated process where you have some checklist and you ask yourself all these questions and write down answers. Like you can do this kind of just like in your head quickly.
You can't make like an fancy Excel with a bunch of.
We're not recommending you go through that process. But once you've asked yourself these questions, you can ask yourself, is this specific scenario worth that specific dollar amount? And so I thought it'd be interesting, Maggie, if we go through some examples and maybe try to come up with, for a common scenario, what both of us would be paying to outsource it.
Okay.
All right. First one, hiring somebody to clean your house every other week. 2 week for 2 hours. What is that worth to you, Maggie?
Well, I think I tip my hat on this one because, and again, I've had times in life when I have hired someone, but it's been I've spent more of my life not having someone and doing it myself. It's not worth a lot to me because I kind of enjoy cleaning and I like cleaning to be done a certain way. And it's a very like personal thing to me. So I like doing it on my own schedule when I want to. I don't want to have a deadline where I've got to have like my whole house ready for someone else to come in and clean. It might be a day that I just don't feel like it. I like just cleaning my bathrooms when they need to be cleaned, which is more often than every 2 weeks. Right. And I like the control and the autonomy of cleaning my house myself. So to me, it's worth very little, but that's why.
Well, that's really interesting. And I think everybody probably has some sort of task that they can relate to this. But I think what you're saying is like, even if someone was like, I will come to your house every 2 weeks and clean for free, you'd be like, even that probably honestly, not worth it.
I really would kind of be like, I'm good. Unless I was just there's phases in my life where I might have been like, okay. But I think I would actually be like, nope. Aside from being skeptical of like, well, why would you do it for free? Nothing's for free. What's your angle? I think I would actually be like, maybe you could do something else during that time, but not clean my house.
Yeah. For me, and I really have to say for Britta, and I say for Britta because I don't really clean the house. That's kind of her task, and I have other household chores. But I think the number is going to be quite low as well, because like you, Britta likes to do things on her schedule. She likes to do things a certain way. She would also want to pre-clean. And so we have looked at house cleaners, and even ones where it might be $50 to get somebody to come over for 2 hours. We're like, no, it's just like there's too much other stuff that goes along with that it's not worth it to us. And so I think we're along the same lines as you. It's even when my parents are in town and they're like, hey, you want us to clean your house? But it's like, no, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So we're kind of like both at $0 for this one.
Yeah, that's a good example. Okay, next example. I like this one because you and I debate this a lot when we're discussing travel planning. So taking a 2-stop 25-hour flight versus a 1-stop 10-hour flight. And just to give an example, this is like clearly it takes 10 hours to get to this destination. So name somewhere in Europe versus you've got to make 2 different stops, have a 5-hour layover, and then another one. And in, random cities that it's not like it's long enough for you to hang out in those cities. And it's been a whole day now until you've gotten to your destination. Yeah.
Now let's go through some of these questions because I think this is really interesting. The first one is like, how much do I dislike the task? Travel days with families, incredibly stressful. Sitting in airports and airplanes, not fun. So this is something that we dislike.
I just say with family. I dislike it with or without. It's a lot easier to just suck it up when it's just like myself and Greg. But it's really unenjoyable with kids.
And then the other big thing is what else we would be doing with that time. We would be in a vacation destination on a beach, hiking a mountain. And so that extra 15 hours is really important, especially if you have limited vacation days. And so this is something we dislike doing. This is something that prevents us from spending our time doing something greatly enjoyable. That's really it. There's going to be a cost associated with saving this time, but there's no skills we're going to learn. There's no safety issues.
Yeah. The skills are like how to entertain bored kids in airports in the middle of the night when they've had no sleep and been eating sugar for a whole day. Hey, the other question on that one, Mike, is what's the cost difference? Because that to me, everything you just said, I agree with. But then my big one on this one is the cost difference, which was one of the questions we talked about, right? The incremental cost of getting that 10-hour direct flight. And I'm a big fan of direct flights. But it depends, right? If we're in a crazy market and that first flight is already $2,000 and the next one is, $1,500, I'm like, ooh, it's $500 difference. Like, and it's a 25% difference versus if it's like double the cost, right? So a lot of it to me is kind of the anchor of whatever the cheaper option is in the first place, because that's kind of my starting point I'm working from. And then what's the incremental amount that I'm going to have to pay to save that time that does matter to me.
I think if it was $1,000 difference, that would be my That would be my max that I would be willing to pay to save that time.
$1,000 total across like your whole family or per ticket?
$1,000 for the family.
Okay.
And actually, now that I say that, it's probably like $1,500.
Okay. Yeah. Because that's the other thing is like for us, it's like whatever that cost is, it's times 5 for my family, times 4 for your family. So,
yeah,
that one ticket you're considering.
Yeah. And so let's give an example. Like we typically spend like a great ticket to Europe for us is like $1,000. So if we had $4,000 of airfare and that was 25 hours, but I could spend $5,500 to do a single direct flight that saved me 15 hours. That would be like a really hard discussion. We would talk about it and then we'd probably do it. But if it was like $2,000 difference, I would take the 2-stop 25-hour flight and just kind of suck it up. Because then it gets to a point where my time isn't worth that much money.
And this is that example you just gave is a good one where this trade-off of time versus money, it's an art, not a science. So you've asked me before when we're like looking at different prices of flights, you said like, what are you willing to pay? What's the incremental amount? And I'm like, I need to know all the scenario, right? I need to know what time I'm landing. Is it in the middle of the night? Is that 25 hours? There's just so many questions of like, is this on the way home? Is it on the way there? Is it, I just have a lot that would go into my calculation. And it's a little bit more of like a gut judgment once I have all those informations and I actually have 2 things in front of me. So I'm not even sure I could put like a $1,500 price limit on or price tag on it the way you did, which I know is an estimate.
Yeah.
But it's a great example of the time versus money piece.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Another example. This is one close to my heart. We often debate this, and I skimmed over this when we were doing our annual expenses review, by the way. Doing your own yard work every other week or whenever you do it versus every other week. Doing your own yard work versus hiring somebody.
Yeah.
So let's assume it, takes you 2 hours every other week, which I'm not sure is entirely accurate. Maybe it is. For every yard. I've got a complex yard with a lot of shrubbery that just is like involves getting on a ladder and other things, which that goes into my answer, right? I like mowing my lawn if it's just mowing your lawn. Mm-hmm. What I dislike and find to be much more tedious and difficult in my particular yard and in many yards is we have a massive amount of shrubbery. I mean, literally, if I counted like 50 plus, I mean, my whole lawn is like house and lawn, front and back is almost like circled in like shrubbery. And anyways, it's a lot. Some of it actually, I mean, the guys that do our yard, they're on ladders getting on it. It looks dangerous at times. It's like on a sloped yard, up high on a ladder, holding a power tool. And it kind of stresses me out. I'm going to do an experiment later this year where I actually do try, which we'll get into in another discussion. But I pay them $60 every time they come. And if you ask me on like most weeks when I watch them and come and get in and out and do what they do, would I rather pay $60 versus muck around with that for a few hours? I would rather pay them $60. The other example too is I don't mind the lawn mowing itself, as I said, but it's like, I need to buy a string trimmer. I've owned one before. They're a pain in the butt. They're always breaking. The strings are always coming off. Like that process of like the maintenance of yard equipment kind of stresses me out. I've had a lot of issues over the years when I've tried, and I know it's not impossible, but it's kind of like, it starts to hit a lot of those questions of like, how much do I dislike the task? What else could I be doing with that time?
And I, on the other hand, like those tools and maintaining those tools, and I don't find it to be a complicated task. And so I have hedge trimmers and string trimmers, and I do all that stuff, and I mow my lawn, and it doesn't take me very long. And so it takes me about an hour to mow my front and back yard and to do some other kind of like little trim up stuff. I don't have like a trim my hedges every week. I'll do it like once every 6 weeks or something. But if somebody came and they're like, I'll do it for $25, I'd be like, I mean, I like mowing my lawn, but I don't like it that much. And if somebody was just going to do it and I wouldn't have to worry about it working in my schedule for $25, I'd be like, yeah, sure. But
would you pay $120 a month, which is what I pay?
No, definitely not.
Okay. By the way, that's a really good price. I've done a lot of like, I've shopped around a lot and had other companies, and that's like one of the best values.
How many visits is that?
That's every 2 weeks.
Okay, so it's $60
So
a visit.
$60 a visit, yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's an hour of my time. It's somewhat enjoyable for me, and I don't find it to be that difficult of a task, and I like the workout. And so if somebody was like, we'll do it for $60, I'd be like, no, I'll just do it myself. But if somebody's like 20 or 25, yeah, sure.
Your workout question is your workout point is a great one, because there are things, and that's one of the things I like about doing yard work is I'm outside, I'm getting physical activity. And so some of these are some of your factors one of the questions we didn't say is like, is it improving my health in some way, right?
Yeah.
Am I spending time? I think about that when I'm cleaning, because when I'm cleaning my house, I'm always listening to something, a podcast or an audiobook.
Yeah.
And that makes it more enjoyable to me. Like I'm kind of able to like multitask and get something in that I want to do anyways. And there's plenty of times that I've actually trying to think if I should admit this, but I've admitted this to my team at work. It's true. Every now and then, I don't have that many calls at work like this, but every now and then I have a call where I like literally just have to listen. It's like a town hall kind of update call. And I'll do those, like clean 2 of my bathrooms during it. Well, I'm in my headphones and I'm paying more attention than if I was sitting at my computer. Because if I was sitting at my computer, I'd be like multitasking and starting to check email and other things. And so I love situations like that where I'm like, oh, I just got something done. And I would just multitask is always a fun thing. So.
Yeah. So last one is going to be doing your own taxes once a year. Let's say it takes you 5 hours. Now,
let's say that 5 hours turns into 10 hours, but
even if it's 10 hours, let's go through some of this. You might pay somebody $400 to do this. I have no idea. How much would it cost to pay somebody to do this?
Oh, I used to pay someone. God, I have to look up what I used to pay him. It started getting so high, which is really when it varies. It could be anywhere. If you have some small independent person in a smaller market, it could cost a few $100s. If you have someone like in Atlanta that's got like a larger practice, it's going to cost well over $500 for a simple person's taxes, like closer to $1,000, I'd say, in today's money.
Okay. So $500 to $1,000. This one is where managing your own money is a great skill. It improves the skill. It helps you get closer and make better decisions to your personal finances. And so even though it might be a skill that you dislike, and it could be reasonably inexpensive to outsource it, it is something that you might actually want to do yourself. And it is something that I want to do myself. Like, I wouldn't say that it's like terribly fun, but I enjoy the challenge and I appreciate the value of staying very close to my finances, and will go through and do that work myself because I see value in using that time. And so I wouldn't pay anybody to do this because I value the exercise itself.
And I agree with you. I think your point about how the value you get from being closer to your money and really understanding what's happening with your taxes is pretty high in this case, especially for people who like talking about money and dealing with money, right? You may not, again, you may kind of loathe this the way I think about trimming my hedges. So, we used to have someone that we paid to do our taxes a long time ago, and the costs kind of slowly started creeping up. And then we had some issues where they actually messed up some stuff. And that's when and I think that was like around the time that I met you also, Mike, and you were a little bit more like, you guys could do this yourself. And my husband is very financially savvy and like deals with this type of stuff at work, and just is very, very much capable of doing our taxes. He now does my mom's taxes for her. And it's something he kind of like you said, like it's some work and it's extra work, but he kind of like enjoys it. It gets him closer to what's actually happening. It's a bit of a time to do like an annual review, and we have the skill set, and we've learned new things through it. And look, we pay for tools like TurboTax that make it a lot easier. So it's not like we're manually doing it using the IRS's forms. Yeah. And I assume you do the same, Mike.
Yes, definitely. TurboTax all the way. All right. Well, that was interesting. I hope people found some value in listening to those examples and going through the questions. I would encourage everybody to, next time you are faced with a situation of whether you should pay for something to save you time, ask yourself some of these questions and see if there might be a different way of doing it, or if you come to a different outcome on how you value your time. So let's hit our top 3 takeaways, Maggie.
Number 1 is your time is valuable, but that doesn't mean you always need to pay someone to get it back.
And number 2, you don't always save as much time as you think you do by outsourcing that work.
Very true. Number 3, there's no formula for putting a dollar value on your time, but if you do evaluate each scenario independently, over time you will identify what you're willing to spend to buy your time back and what you're not. And hopefully some of the examples we walked through and some of the questions we talked through will help you to hone that skill and just be more, I always love the word intentional, which we use a lot, but be more thoughtful and intentional about the choices you're making in how you want to spend your time.
Well, thanks everybody for listening. If you've been challenged or inspired by what you've heard, please rate and review the show. You can also subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode.
If you have any thoughts or questions, we would always love to hear from you, and you can leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370, or you can hit us up on Instagram.
All right. Thanks, Maggie.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
All right. Bye.
Bye.